So I just went through a little workout, and as I'm moving and transitioning through my movements in the workout, I felt like my hips were still a little restricted, right? I didn't have full hip extension that I wanted, and as I was extending, I was starting to open up a little bit, right? I was starting to toe out, and I felt everything back here just kind of pulling through. Well, right, I have my hip external rotators, which are probably a little tight, which might be the cause of that toe out, as well as potentially restriction at the bottom of my movement pattern. But I want to focus on the anterior hip right now, as it moves through here, hip flexor, as well as my TFL. I feel hip flexor is usually tight, and it is right now, because as I was squatting, I could feel I was starting to overextend, which means this wasn't allowing me to push through that movement. And as I come to stand, I was caught in that position instead of loading, contracting through the glutes, and be able to have full hip extension. I also want to activate, like I said, we're focusing on anterior hip right now. I want to try to activate my TFL. So if I'm standing here, hand on the outside of the hip, pivot, foot, leg, in and out, I can feel my greater trochanter, that bone right there. That's the area that my TFL is in. Think of kind of that front pocket, right where it sits. ASIS, hip bone, greater trochanter, pivot, feel, right in between, that's where that TFL is. So the way I would mobilize that, if I'm standing, I'm at a rig, take yoga block. We have a wonderful trigger point MBX right here. I'm going to place that ball just inside my ASIS, my hip bone, and I'm going to focus on trying to release the region, the area. You're really not going to get specifically on the muscle, but you can at least get pretty close to it if you work just inside that hip flexor, because that's where the muscle's most superficial. So as I push, I squeeze in there. All I'm going to do is fully flex and then extend as much as I can, right? If I feel like I need a little more pressure, I rotate the yoga block, I take a few steps back, and I lean into it just a little bit more. And same thing, as I hold my balance, flex, and I try to fully extend. And as I get to the back, I want to keep my foot flat, push through my heel, almost donkey kick, and contract my glutes. When I'm trying to get into the TFL, right, I want to, again, find that area between the hip bone and the greater trochanter, take my ball, and then I'm going to come on the outside, right in that space, find it, scan the area, lean into it, and again, flex and extend. Flex, extend. As that kind of works through there, I can even just find the hot spot, the area that I think is potentially causing my issues, lean into it, right? Trigger point it, hold it there for 30 seconds up to 2 minutes to see if I can feel a release. What I can also do, flex and extend the knee, right? As I transition there and I can feel the muscle activating to stabilize my leg and my hip, I can also internally and externally rotate, allowing the trigger point ball to get in there and apply a little bit of cross friction on that tissue to reduce any additional adhesion. Now, with those two movements, I showed you one position where you can mobilize. You can work through that entire region, right? The hip flexor goes from the anterior medial portion of the femur, working in towards the belly button, but on the anterior aspect, right? On the front of the spine. So it kind of crosses in from the hip through the body to the front of the spine. Which is why I try to say, focus on just mobilizing the region. Don't worry about getting too deep right now. Leave that to the professionals. But work on where the area, the muscle is most superficial, just inside the hip bone.